It was just another take in a supernatural revenge thriller. The scene had been rehearsed, blocked, and carefully staged. The gun was a prop. The crew, seasoned professionals. The star, Brandon Lee, charismatic, magnetic, and rising fast through Hollywood's ranks. And then, in a flash, something went horribly wrong. What was meant to be a dramatic shootout on screen suddenly turned real. The actor collapsed. Confusion swept the set. At first, no one moved. Was he improvising? Was it part of the scene? It wasn't. Within minutes, that confusion turned into panic, and soon after, into heartbreak. Why were safety protocols ignored? And was this just a tragic accident or a disaster waiting to happen? Brandon Lee, the son of martial arts legend Bruce Lee, was on the brink of becoming a household name. He had the looks, the skills, the legacy, and one breakout role that was about to change everything. But instead of catapulting him to stardom, that role would lead to something else entirely, something no one saw coming. Brandon Lee wasn't just born into fame, he was born into a legacy. The son of Bruce Lee, Brandon came into the world in 1965 under a shadow cast by greatness. His father wasn't just a martial artist, he was a global phenomenon. A man who redefined action cinema, challenged racial stereotypes, and left a mark so deep it became myth. For Brandon, that legacy was both a gift and a weight. As a child, Brandon struggled with motor skills. Doctors called him a late bloomer. But by the age of 7, he was driving his dad's Jeep around the yard. By 10, he was watching his father train disciples in Jeet Kune Do. Then, suddenly, everything changed. In 1973, Bruce Lee died unexpectedly at just 32 years old. Brandon was 8. Not just for the world, but for a son who hadn't yet gotten to know the man behind the legend. It left Brandon with a gaping emotional scar, and for a time, he drifted. He lived between Hong Kong and the US, constantly readjusting. Language, culture, identity. He was the boy carrying Bruce Lee's name, long before he understood what that even meant. But as he got older, the fire inside him reignited. With help from his father's protege, Dan Inosanto, Brandon resumed martial arts training. He didn't just imitate Bruce. He studied his philosophy, absorbed his ideas, and carved out a style that was unmistakably his own. Still, he never wanted to be a clone. He loved film, loved acting, and long before anyone took him seriously, he said it out loud. "I don't want to be the next Bruce Lee. I want to be the first Brandon Lee." He meant it. From high school rebellion to headlining Hong Kong action films, Brandon was a natural performer. He wasn't trying to act cool, he just was. His roles in Showdown in Little Tokyo, Rapid Fire, and Legacy of Rage made one thing clear. Brandon Lee could carry a movie. He had the looks, the instincts, the quiet intensity, and now he had The Crow. It wasn't just another role, it was the one. A gritty supernatural revenge epic. A chance to step into the dark, complex territory Hollywood rarely allowed Asian American leads to explore. A film full of fire, rage, love, and a heavy dose of fate. Brandon was ready. Personally, professionally. He was engaged to Eliza Hutton, planning a quiet wedding after the shoot. He had just signed on for future films that would let him shed the martial arts typecasting and step fully into dramatic roles. He was happy. He was grounded. He had finally arrived. But what no one knew was that something had already gone wrong on set. A small mistake, hidden, ignored, or simply missed, was waiting just off camera. And Brandon was walking straight toward it. The film was ambitious, moody, and soaked in gothic grit. Brandon Lee was thriving in the role of Eric Draven, a murdered musician resurrected to avenge his and his fiance's deaths. It was brutal, poetic, and tailor-made for a breakout star. Behind the scenes, though, the set was anything but smooth. There were rumors of mishandled weapons, misfires, and lapses in safety. But no one expected the chain reaction that was already set in motion. A revolver had been loaded with custom, dummy rounds. These cartridges were supposed to be harmless. They had no gunpowder, just the appearance of a real bullet for close-up shots. But whoever modified those dummy rounds made a critical mistake. They removed the powder but left the primer. The small explosive charge at the base of a cartridge. That primer had just enough force to lodge the bullet deep into the barrel without anyone noticing. Now that same gun, now cleared and reloaded with blanks for an upcoming scene, was back on set. No one realized that a live bullet was already hiding in the chamber, and the camera was about to roll again. The gun was loaded. The actor was in place. March 31st, 1993. It was supposed to be Brandon Lee's final night shooting scenes involving firearms. Just one more setup, one more take, then they could move on. The scene called for Brandon's character, Eric Draven, to confront the gang who murdered his fiancée. It was a dramatic turning point, emotionally charged, choreographed like clockwork. Brandon walked onto the set in full costume, pale face, long black coat, eyes heavy with that signature crow makeup. The cameras rolled. Actor Michael Massey, playing the villain Funboy, raised a .44 Magnum revolver. According to the script, he was supposed to fire as Eric walked into the room, shooting him point blank with a blank round, meant to mimic the sound and flash of a real gun, without any projectile. And Brandon collapsed. At first, no one panicked. It looked real, sure, but Brandon was a method actor, falling forward instead of backward. Maybe he improvised. Maybe it made the shot more visceral. But then he didn't get up. Assistant director Jeff Imada rushed in. The medics were called. The mood shifted from confusion to terror. The revolver that had been safely loaded with blanks had, in fact, discharged a real bullet, the same one that had been silently lodged in the barrel days earlier. The blank round's explosive force was more than enough to launch it at full velocity. It struck Brandon Lee in the abdomen, a direct hit, deep, devastating. Crew members were in shock. Some began to cry. Massey, the actor who pulled the trigger, went pale and silent. He would later describe the moment as something that never left him. For the rest of his life, he carried it like a scar. Brandon was rushed to New Hanover Regional Medical Center. He was still breathing. Surgeons worked for hours, trying to repair the extensive internal damage, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. At 1:03 p.m., after 6 hours of surgery, Brandon Lee was pronounced dead. He was 28 years old. The scene, the weapon, the entire day, it was never supposed to happen this way. And yet, the perfect storm of negligence, haste, and miscommunication had turned a Hollywood set into a crime scene. But the story wasn't over, not even close. What followed would shake the industry, ignite lawsuits, and expose a hidden flaw in the world of on-set firearm safety. And it all came down to one fatal oversight. What made it worse? No licensed armorer had been present. The responsibility for gun safety had been shuffled between crew members under tight scheduling and budget constraints. No one double-checked the weapon before the final take. No one expected it to be loaded, but it was. Brandon's death was officially ruled an accident, but the word accident didn't sit right with everyone, especially not his family. The fallout was immediate and ugly. The Lee family, devastated and furious, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the filmmakers. It wasn't just grief, it was anger at the shortcuts, the carelessness, the negligence that turned a safe scene into a fatal one. The case was eventually settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, but the industry had already been shaken. Brandon's death forced a reckoning in Hollywood. Gun protocols were reevaluated. Productions began hiring professional armorers more consistently. The importance of checking every weapon before every shot became gospel, not suggestion. Blanks were scrutinized. Dummy rounds banned on many sets. Safety guidelines were rewritten from the ground up. But it wasn't enough to undo what happened. Actor Michael Massey, who had unknowingly fired the fatal shot, was never charged. He never acted again for over a year. And until his death in 2016, he openly admitted that he had never watched The Crow. He couldn't. The movie was completed using Brandon's stunt double, Chad Stahelski, and early CGI. When it was released in 1994, The Crow was both a critical and commercial success, grossing nearly $100 million worldwide. But to those who worked on it or knew Brandon, it was never just a film. It was a monument to what should have been. Brandon Lee didn't get to become the star he was meant to be. He didn't get to marry Eliza Hutton, start the family he dreamed about, or show the world what he was truly capable of beyond the fight scenes and slow-motion shootouts. His career was just beginning, and then it was gone. But what he left behind still speaks.